John Whitaker had lived all his life on the wide, dusty plains of Red Creek Ranch. The ranch had been in his family for generations. Every morning he woke up before sunrise, fed the cattle, checked the fences, and tended to the fields. Life was hard, but John loved it. The ranch was more than land. It was freedom, tradition, and a promise he had made to his father, to protect it at all costs. The small town nearby was quiet, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. But under the calm surface, John sensed tension. Rumors floated around about strange happenings, people disappearing, businesses closing overnight, whispers of deals no one wanted outsiders to know. Most ignored these stories, but John was different. He had always had a curious mind and a strong sense of justice. He could not turn a blind eye. It started on a sweltering afternoon. John was fixing a fence near the edge of his property when he noticed an old hidden trail he had never seen before. The trail led into a thick patch of trees, far from the usual paths. He hesitated. Something about the trail felt wrong, but John's curiosity was stronger than his caution. He followed it. At the end of the trail, he stumbled upon a small abandoned shed. Its walls were weathered, the wood rotting, and the lock rusted. It looked forgotten, almost invisible to the world. Yet inside he found something he never expected. Documents, ledgers, and files scattered across the floor, some stained with age and dirt. He picked one up carefully. His eyes widened as he read. The papers revealed a secret so dangerous it made his heart pound. Powerful people in the town had been involved in illegal land deals, taking property from small families under false claims. There were lists of names, dates, and amounts of money. Some of the documents even mentioned past disappearances, people who had vanished after asking too many questions. John's hands shook as he realized the truth. These were not just rumors. The secret he had uncovered could ruin lives or end them. John left the shed quickly, careful not to touch anything else. He returned home, his mind racing. He paced back and forth in his living room, thinking about what to do next. Should he go to the authorities? Or should he keep quiet and pretend he had never seen anything? He knew the danger. People who knew this secret were never safe. Some in town whispered that those who asked too many questions paid the price. That night, John sat on his porch looking at the dark horizon. The stars twinkled above, indifferent to the fear and danger in his heart. He remembered his father's words. A Whitaker does what is right even if the world doesn't understand it. The memory gave him courage. He could not ignore the truth. Someone had to stand up. Someone had to protect the innocent. That someone was him. The next morning, John began quietly investigating. He did not tell anyone. He had to be careful. The town was small and rumors traveled fast. If the wrong people knew he was looking, he could be in serious trouble. He started with the families who had lost land or property. Many were scared, hesitant to talk. Some were afraid of angering powerful people who controlled the town's wealth and law. But slowly, John gathered bits of information. Names, dates, small confirmations that matched what he had seen in the shed. Days turned into weeks. John's careful investigation revealed more than he imagined. The conspiracy reached higher than he thought. Some officials, businessmen, and even a few law enforcers were involved. He realized this was not just about land. It was about control. These people wanted power, and they would do anything to keep it. Even as fear crept into his heart, John could not stop. Each night he reviewed the documents, taking notes, connecting dots. The truth was heavy, but it was a burden he felt he had to carry. He understood that exposing this secret would not be easy. The people involved were dangerous and they would do everything to protect themselves. But John knew one thing for sure: silence was not an option. If he stayed quiet, more people would suffer. One evening, as he was walking back from checking the fences, he noticed something strange near the edge of his property. A figure was standing in the shadows watching him. John's heart skipped a beat. The town had always seemed quiet, but now the danger felt real. He approached cautiously, but the figure disappeared into the trees before he could see who it was. That night, John made a decision. He would continue uncovering the truth, but he would also protect himself. He set up safe places to store the documents and made a plan. He knew the road ahead was dangerous, but he also knew he could not turn back. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was acting despite it. For the first time, John truly understood the meaning of responsibility. This secret was bigger than him, bigger than the ranch, bigger than anyone in town. and yet he was the only one standing between it and the people who could be harmed by it. Every morning as the sun rose over Red Creek Ranch, John felt the weight of the secret pressing down, but also a strange sense of purpose. He knew the path ahead would not be easy. There would be threats, dangers, and moments when he might doubt himself. But one thing was certain: he would not stay silent. Not when lives were at stake. Not when the truth could set things right. John Whitaker, the quiet rancher of Red Creek, had discovered a secret that could destroy powerful people. And even if it cost him everything, he was ready to face the danger. The battle between courage and fear had begun, and John had chosen to stand on the side of truth. Little did he know, his journey had already caught the attention of those who would do anything to keep their secret safe. The danger was real, and soon the quiet life of Red Creek Ranch would be shattered forever. After discovering the hidden documents, John Whitaker knew that life on Red Creek Ranch would never be the same. The secret he had unearthed was dangerous, and the people behind it were not the type to forgive curiosity. John worked carefully, making notes and piecing together the truth bit by bit. He knew that exposing the secret would help the town and the families who had suffered, but it would also put him in serious danger. At first, John tried to act normally. He tended to the cattle, repaired fences, and maintained the ranch as if nothing had changed. But he could feel it. Eyes watching him, a shadow moving just beyond the fence line, or a car slowly driving past the edge of his property. The ranch, once peaceful, now felt alive with danger. Every creak of the barn, every howl of a distant coyote made his heart race. One afternoon, while fixing a broken gate near the southern pasture, John noticed tire marks he hadn't seen before. The ground was soft from the recent rain, and the tracks led straight toward the old shed where he had found the documents. Someone had been there. Someone had been watching. He felt a chill run down his spine. Whoever it was had been looking for him, or for the proof he had taken. John knew he needed to be careful. He began locking the documents in a hidden box buried beneath a stack of old hay bales in the barn. He only accessed it at night using a small lantern that barely lit the room. Even so, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following him, listening to every move. A few days later, his fears turned into warnings. A man, tall and silent, appeared at the edge of the ranch one morning. John saw him from the barn, leaning against his truck, eyes fixed on the house. When John approached, the man tipped his hat and walked away without a word. It was a simple gesture, but John felt the meaning behind it. "We know you're looking." "Stop now." John's hands shook, but he refused to give in. He remembered his father's words. A Whitaker does not run from fear. Fear is the test of your courage, not the master of your life. He spent that night reviewing the documents again, carefully cross-checking names and dates. The secret was bigger than he imagined. Powerful families, business owners, and even a few local officials were involved. It was no longer just about land. It was about control, influence, and money. The next warning came in a more subtle way. One morning, John found a large branch snapped in the yard, and his dog, Max, growled at nothing. The air felt heavier, charged with tension. John realized that the people behind the secret were watching his every move, waiting for a mistake. It wasn't just intimidation, it was a threat. Despite the danger, John continued to gather information. He visited families who had lost land and quietly spoke with neighbors who had seen strange dealings. Many were scared and refused to speak, afraid of the powerful people who controlled the town. But some trusted John. They shared what they knew, little by little. Each story, each confirmation, made the secret more real and more dangerous to those who wanted it hidden. One evening, while returning from town, John noticed a car parked across the road. It was a dark sedan, engine running, lights dimmed. He slowed down and felt a cold knot of fear in his stomach. The car followed him for a few miles, then vanished as suddenly as it appeared. John knew this was no coincidence. They were testing him, letting him know that he was being watched. John's life became a careful balance of routine and vigilance. He worked on the ranch during the day, always alert. At night, he reviewed documents, planned his next steps, and double-checked the hidden box where he kept the evidence. Every phone call, every knock at the door made him tense. He realized he could trust almost no one. Even neighbors who seemed friendly could be spies for the powerful people trying to protect the secret. The tension came to a head one afternoon. John was repairing a section of fence near the northern pasture. when he saw a truck parked in the field across the road. Two men were standing outside, arms crossed, watching him silently. John's pulse quickened. They didn't speak, didn't move toward him, but the message was clear. Stop digging or face consequences. John clenched his fists. Fear was there, but it did not control him. He looked out over the fields, the cattle grazing peacefully, unaware of the danger surrounding them. This land, his family's legacy, was worth fighting for. He would not let fear drive him away. He had to continue. He had to protect the truth. That night, he called a trusted friend from a nearby town, someone who had once helped his father with legal matters. They spoke in hushed tones about what John had discovered. The friend was shocked but supportive. "You have to be careful," he said. "These people are dangerous. They don't forgive. They don't forget. But the truth has to come out." John felt a mixture of relief and renewed determination. He was not alone. There were people who would help him expose the secret, even if it was dangerous. But he also knew that each step forward could put him and others at risk. The stakes were higher than ever. In the following days, strange things began happening around the ranch. Tools went missing, fences were cut in places he had already repaired, and at night he heard distant voices near the property line. It was clear the threats were escalating. They wanted to scare him, to make him stop. But John was resolute. He would not back down. He began documenting everything: threats, strange sightings, suspicious vehicles. Each note, each record became a layer of protection and proof. John knew that one day, if something happened to him, someone else could continue the fight. The secret had to be exposed, and he had to make sure the evidence survived him. The quiet town of Red Creek, once peaceful and ordinary, now felt like a battleground. John Whitaker, the rancher who lived a simple life, had stepped into a dangerous world of power, corruption, and secrets. And though he felt fear, he also felt a growing strength. Courage, he realized, was not the absence of fear. It was acting in spite of it. As the sun set over the fields, casting long shadows across the ranch, John stood at the edge of the pasture and looked toward the horizon. The road ahead was dangerous, uncertain, and full of threats. But he had made his choice. He would continue to uncover the truth. He would protect the innocent. He would not stay silent. And somewhere in the darkness, the people who wanted the secret buried were watching, waiting, calculating their next move. John's life had changed forever. The warnings had begun, but so had his resolve. The battle between courage and danger was only starting, and John Whitaker was ready to face it head-on. The tension around Red Creek Ranch was growing heavier with each passing day. John Whitaker knew the danger was no longer distant. Now it was close. The mysterious vehicles, the silent watchers, the broken tools, all of it signaled that the people behind the secret were no longer sending warnings. They were preparing to act. One evening, after a long day tending to the cattle, John noticed the same dark sedan parked near the edge of his property. This time he did not feel fear alone. He felt the weight of inevitability. They were coming for him. He quickly went inside, secured the documents, and called his trusted friend in the nearby town. His friend's voice was calm but urgent on the other end. "John, listen to me. Get out of there tonight. Go somewhere safe. They're not just watching. They're planning to move. You have to disappear until we can get proof to the right people." John's mind raced. Leaving the ranch meant abandoning his life, his land, the cattle, everything he had fought to protect. But staying meant risking capture, or worse. After a moment of thought, he grabbed the hidden box with the documents, covered it with blankets, and prepared to leave quietly. As darkness fell, John mounted his old truck and drove slowly along the winding roads leading away from the ranch. The night was thick with fog, and the headlights barely cut through the darkness. He kept looking in the rearview mirror, every shadow making him flinch. Then he saw them, headlights appearing behind him, moving fast. They had followed him. John pressed the accelerator, heart pounding. He knew these men were dangerous. Their silence spoke louder than words. Every turn he took, every curve in the road was a test of skill and courage. He had grown up driving these roads, but fear made them feel treacherous. Suddenly, the truck in pursuit swerved, blocking the road ahead. John slammed the brakes hard in his throat. He was trapped. From the shadows, two men stepped out, arms folded, faces hidden. There was no hesitation in their movement. They gestured for him to step out of the truck. John's mind raced. He could run, but the open fields offered no cover. Resistance would only provoke violence. He took a deep breath, opened the door, and stepped out, hands raised. The men didn't touch him roughly, but their presence was enough to make it clear he had no choice. They led him to a small, abandoned barn a few miles away from the main road. The place smelled of dust and old hay. Inside, a small crowd waited, mostly men he had seen around town but never spoken to. Their faces were hard, unyielding. They were not there to talk. They were there to punish. A wooden beam had been placed across the center of the barn. John recognized it for what it was, a symbolic hanging. This was not just punishment. It was a warning. They wanted to scare anyone else who might think of discovering their secret. The crowd murmured, but John did not respond. His heart raced, but his mind was clear. Fear was real, but courage had a place too. One of the men, taller than the others, stepped forward. He spoke slowly, carefully, as if testing John's resolve. "You know too much," he said. "You've seen what you shouldn't have. We can't let this continue. Learn your place." John's hands did not tremble this time. He met the man's eyes steadily. "I will not stay silent," he said. His voice was firm, controlled. "People have a right to know the truth. What you've done, hurting innocent families, it has to stop." The taller man's expression did not change. He nodded to the others. John felt them move closer, ready to carry out the warning. They placed the rope around his wrists, lifted him onto the beam, and prepared the demonstration. John's heart pounded, but he stayed calm. He focused on his breathing, thinking about the ranch, the families who had suffered, and the documents safely hidden. His courage grew stronger with every passing moment. Then something unexpected happened. A loud shout echoed from outside. John's friend, the one he had called days before, appeared with a few allies from nearby towns. They had tracked him, knowing he was in danger. The group rushed into the barn, surprising the men who had captured John. A tense struggle followed, but the intruders managed to create enough distraction for John to break free. He tumbled to the ground, gasping for breath, adrenaline coursing through his body. His eyes darted to the documents in his hands. They were intact, hidden under the blankets as he had planned. The men who had tried to punish him were momentarily stunned, unsure how to react. John's friend grabbed his arm. "Come on, quick. We don't have much time." They ran out of the barn into the darkness, moving fast toward a safe location. The night air was cold, biting at John's face, but he barely noticed. Relief washed over him, but only for a moment. The danger was not gone, it had only been delayed. The people behind the secret were still out there, watching, waiting, planning. By the time they reached a safe house several miles away, John was shaking, not from fear but from the intensity of what had just happened. He set the box of documents down carefully, checking each file. Everything was still there. Nothing had been damaged or taken. His friend looked at him with concern. "John, this is serious. They tried to make an example of you. If we don't act carefully, they'll come back, and next time they might not be so gentle." John nodded slowly. He understood the risk more clearly now than ever before. The secret he had discovered was dangerous, and the people who wanted it buried were ruthless. But he also understood something else. His courage, his resolve, and his unwillingness to stay silent had saved him tonight. They spent the rest of the night planning. John would continue to gather proof, but they needed to move strategically. They couldn't act recklessly. The goal was not just survival. It was exposing the truth so that justice could reach those who had been hurt. As dawn broke, John looked out from the window of the safe house. The fields he had loved, the ranch he had fought to protect, all seemed distant yet more important than ever. He realized that the danger he faced was not just for him. It was for the families, the town, and the truth itself. The capture and hanging had been a warning. A test, but it had also strengthened him. John Whitaker, the rancher who had lived a simple life, now knew that courage was more than a word. It was a choice, and he had chosen to stand for truth no matter the cost. He took a deep breath and began preparing for the next step. The secret was far from exposed, and the fight was only beginning. But one thing was certain: John would not run, and he would not stay silent. The road ahead was dangerous, full of threats and uncertainty, but John Whitaker was ready. The night had tested him, but it had not broken him, and soon the world would learn the truth he had uncovered. After the terrifying night of capture, John Whitaker knew there was no turning back. The danger was real, and the people behind the secret were ruthless, but fear would not stop him. He had survived because he refused to give in, and now his mission was clear. The truth must be revealed no matter the risk. John spent the next few days in the safe house, planning every move carefully. He reviewed the documents again, making copies and organizing them so that they could be used as evidence. He contacted a few trusted allies in nearby towns, people who had no ties to the powerful families controlling Red Creek. They agreed to help him spread the truth safely, without putting anyone else at risk. The first step was reaching the local newspaper. John knew that print media still held power, especially in small towns. He arranged a secret meeting with the editor, a man named Samuel Hayes who had a reputation for integrity and courage. When John explained the situation and showed the documents, Samuel's eyes widened. "This is serious, John," Samuel said quietly, leaning back in his chair. "These people are powerful. They won't take this lightly. You could be in danger again, even more than before." John nodded. "I know, but people need to know the truth. I can't stay silent. If we don't act, more families will lose their land. More people will be hurt." Samuel understood the gravity of John's words. They devised a plan to publish the story safely, using anonymous sources and verified evidence. John would provide the proof, and the newspaper would carefully expose the corruption without putting him directly in the spotlight. While preparations were underway, John continued gathering information from the families affected by the secret. He visited them quietly, often arriving at dusk or early morning to avoid attracting attention. Many were still fearful, but seeing John's determination inspired them. One by one, they shared their experiences: lost homes, stolen land, threats, and intimidation. John listened carefully, took notes, and added these stories to the growing pile of evidence. At the same time, the men who had tried to punish him were still watching. John noticed strange vehicles near the edges of his property, shadows moving in the distance, and unfamiliar faces in town. It was clear that the warning he had received was only the beginning. They were testing him, trying to see if he would give up. But John did not falter. Each threat made him more determined to act. Courage, he realized, grew stronger when fear was present. One evening, John returned from a visit to a family whose property had been taken years ago. As he drove down the dusty road, he noticed headlights behind him again. His heart raced, but he stayed calm. He didn't speed or panic. Instead, he took a detour through the old forest path he knew well. The cars followed, but John was familiar with every twist and turn, and eventually they lost sight of him. That night, John added the latest information to the files he had prepared. Each story, each detail made the secret more undeniable. The corruption was extensive, involving business owners, town officials, and even law enforcement officers. The scale of it was shocking, but John knew that exposing it could save the town from further harm. With the newspaper ready to publish, John felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. The story would shake Red Creek, and the powerful people behind the secret would not be happy. But John also felt a sense of justice. Finally, the truth would be known. He had risked everything to get this far, and he was determined to see it through. When the article finally appeared in the local newspaper, it caused an immediate stir. Families who had lost property felt validated, and neighbors began speaking out. The story was written carefully, presenting the evidence and highlighting the injustice without naming John directly. Still, everyone understood that someone brave had uncovered the truth. The powerful people who had tried to silence John reacted predictably. There were threats, angry phone calls, and attempts to intimidate the newspaper. But the truth was now public, and the community began to rally behind it. People who had been afraid to speak suddenly found courage, sharing their own experiences and supporting the fight against corruption. John watched all of this from the safe house, feeling a mixture of relief and pride. He knew the battle was far from over, but seeing the impact of his actions was encouraging. The community had begun to stand together, united against the corruption that had once seemed untouchable. Even with the exposure, John remained vigilant. He knew the people behind the secret would not give up easily. There were still risks, revenge, sabotage, and further threats, but John had learned to navigate danger. He continued his routine at the ranch cautiously, always aware of his surroundings. Each day was a balance between normal life and careful preparation, but he refused to let fear control him. As the weeks passed, legal authorities began taking notice of the story. Investigations were launched and some of the powerful people were called in for questioning. John provided evidence anonymously, ensuring his safety while helping the process move forward. He realized that courage was not just about facing danger, it was about acting with wisdom and strategy. Through it all, John remained humble. He never sought recognition for his actions. His goal was always the truth and the well-being of the families affected. The ranch, once just a piece of land he loved, had become a symbol of justice, courage, and integrity. One evening, as the sun set over the fields, John stood on the porch of the safe house looking at the horizon. The wind carried the scent of the grass and cattle, familiar and comforting. He reflected on how far he had come, from discovering the secret in the hidden shed to helping expose corruption that had harmed so many people. It had been a journey of fear, danger, and determination, but also one of hope and resilience. John knew the fight was not completely over. Some people involved in the secret still held power, and there were risks ahead. But he also knew that change had begun. The community had awakened, and the truth had a power that could not be ignored. Courage, honesty, and persistence had made a difference. For the first time in weeks, John allowed himself a moment of peace. He had faced the danger, defied the threats, and begun to bring justice to the town he loved. The secret was no longer hidden, and the people who had suffered now had a voice. John Whitaker, the quiet rancher from Red Creek, had refused to stay silent. His courage had sparked a movement, proving that one determined individual could make a difference even against powerful forces. And as he watched the sun dip below the horizon, he knew that he would continue to stand for truth no matter what challenges lay ahead. The danger was still out there, waiting in the shadows. But John had learned that courage was stronger than fear, and the truth was stronger than silence. And with that knowledge, he faced each new day with determination, ready to protect the innocent and defend justice, no matter the cost. The days after the newspaper story were tense but hopeful. John Whitaker stayed alert, knowing the people behind the secret were still powerful. But he also saw change beginning to take hold in Red Creek. Families who had suffered for years started speaking up, neighbors supported one another, and whispers of fear turned into discussions of courage. The town was slowly awakening to the truth. Investigations by local authorities and outside officials began in earnest. Some of the powerful individuals named in the documents were called in for questioning. John continued to provide evidence anonymously, ensuring the safety of himself and his family, while helping authorities uncover the full scope of the corruption. Every time a new piece of evidence was confirmed, the weight on John's shoulders seemed lighter. His efforts were starting to make a real difference. One morning, John received a letter from the county office. The handwriting was formal, the paper official. It stated that an inquiry had found evidence of wrongdoing by several influential people in the town. Some had been asked to step down from their positions. Others faced legal action. John felt a mix of relief and satisfaction. The truth was no longer hidden, and justice was slowly taking shape. Word spread through the town like wildfire. Families who had lost land received recognition for their claims, and some had their property restored. People who had once been afraid to speak began sharing their experiences publicly. Red Creek was changing, not just because of legal action, but because the community had learned that courage mattered. One person standing for truth could inspire many to follow. John returned to his ranch, the place that had always been his home and refuge. The fields, the cattle, and the quiet hills seemed to welcome him back, as if they had been waiting for him to return safely. He walked along the fences, checking the cattle and making sure everything was in order. The ranch had survived the storm, and so had he. But more importantly, the town had survived too, and justice had begun to take root. The experience had changed John. He was no longer just the quiet rancher who worked the land and kept to himself. He was a man who had faced danger, defied threats, and stood for truth. People in the community looked at him differently now, with respect and admiration. Yet John remained humble. He never sought recognition or praise. He had done what he had to do, not for fame, but because it was right. One afternoon, a group of families came to the ranch. They brought food, gifts, and kind words. They thanked John for his courage, telling him how his actions had given them hope and justice. Some had tears in their eyes, others smiled warmly. John felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The ranch, the land he loved, had become more than a home. It had become a symbol of courage and truth. As the sun set that evening, John stood on the porch looking at the horizon. The golden light fell across the fields and the cattle moved quietly in the distance. The air was calm, carrying the faint smell of grass and soil. John reflected on the journey he had taken, from discovering the dangerous secret in the old shed to facing threats, capture, and near harm to now seeing justice begin to take hold. He realized that courage was not just a single act. It was a choice made every day, in moments of fear and uncertainty. Courage meant standing for what was right even when the odds seemed impossible. It meant protecting the innocent, speaking truth, and refusing to stay silent. John Whitaker had learned this lesson deeply, and he hoped that others in the town would carry it forward. Though some of the people responsible for the corruption still held minor influence, the fear that had once gripped Red Creek was gone. The community had found its voice, and the truth had set many free. John knew the fight was not completely over, but the path forward was clear. People were no longer afraid to stand up, and that was the greatest victory of all. John returned to his daily routine, tending to the ranch with renewed purpose. Each sunrise brought new challenges. Cattle needed care, fences required repair, and the land demanded attention. But these tasks no longer felt mundane. They were a reminder that life continued, that even after danger, ordinary work and dedication had meaning. The ranch was his anchor, his symbol of resilience, and his connection to the life he loved. Late at night, when the stars filled the sky, John sometimes thought about the night of his capture, the rope around his wrists, and the faces of those who had tried to intimidate him. The memory still brought a chill, but it also brought strength. He had faced the greatest danger he had ever known, and he had survived. More importantly, he had made a difference. The town of Red Creek slowly healed. Families regained their properties, neighbors supported each other, and a new sense of fairness began to flourish. John's bravery had shown that one person could change the course of events, that courage in the face of danger mattered. Children growing up in the town would learn the story of the rancher, who refused to stay silent, and how standing for truth had made a difference in their lives. In the quiet moments, John would sometimes look at the horizon and smile. He had faced fear, defied threats, and stood firmly for justice. The secret that had once threatened to destroy lives was now out in the open, and the community was stronger because of it. John Whitaker had fulfilled the promise he had made to his father, not just to protect the ranch, but to protect what was right. As the seasons changed, life on Red Creek Ranch returned to a rhythm of work and peace. The wind carried the scent of grass and earth, the cattle moved slowly across the fields, and the sun rose and set as it always had. Yet the town and its people were different now. They had learned that courage mattered, that truth was worth protecting, and that one person could indeed make a difference. John Whitaker continued his work on the ranch, but he also continued to be a quiet guardian of justice. He remained humble, never boasting, but always ready to stand for what was right. His life had changed forever, but so had the lives of the people he had helped protect. And so Red Creek thrived once again, its community stronger and more united. John Whitaker's courage and determination became a lasting example of bravery, truth, and integrity. The rancher, who had discovered a dangerous secret and faced fear head-on, had ensured that justice was not just a word, but a reality for the people of his town. Even as the sun set over the wide plains, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange, John stood tall, knowing that his actions had made a difference. The secret was exposed, the innocent were protected, and the town had found its voice. John Whitaker, the quiet rancher, had refused to stay silent, and in doing so he had changed everything.